Well, here we go again. Jim and Eric here to talk about some bad news on the Flash movie front. Rick Famuyiwa, the director of Dope, dropped out of directing the Flash movie today. Eric, this is not the first time the Flash movie has lost its director.
Yeah.
First one was Seth Grahame-Smith.
Yeah, so two directors leaving the movie.
Over creative differences.
In, 8 months or so.
Yeah.
So not a great sign,
Nope.
especially like all eyes were on, DC coming out of Batman vs. Superman especially, but then also Suicide Squad, which, there was a lot of criticism of that film as well. And so all eyes were like, what are they going to do? How are they going to sort of right this ship? And so the fact that The Flash has now lost two directors seems to indicate that there are still some issues being worked out behind the scenes.
And this is also after Jeff Johns and John Berg came in to run DC Films.
Yeah.
Now, Rick Famuyiwa's vision of the film was reportedly not in line with what DC wanted.
Right.
Now the question is, we should say Warner Brothers, not DC. The question is, do they know what they want?
Right.
Really. This isn't the first. This isn't the Suicide Squad movie. Notoriously, there were all the reshoots and behind-the-scenes stuff there with David Ayer. There were the two competing cuts. Even Zack Snyder, in the wake of BVS, going into Justice League, reportedly came under a lot of pressure, if you will, put it kindly.
Right.
Now, he's still directing the film, but there does seem to be a lot more oversight there. But we should point out that this isn't just related to the Flash movie and to Warner Brothers having issues. I mean, Deadpool 2 just lost its director, Tim Miller, last week. The Gambit movie can't seem to hold on to a director.
Yep.
It's gone through Rupert Wyatt, Doug Liman. There were rumblings earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, of James Wan may be leaving Aquaman, but he's still on there. And then, of course, Michelle McLaren left Wonder Woman last year. So my question, Eric, is have superhero movies become too big, too risk-averse to be director-friendly? I mean, Marvel certainly had a few directors drop out, Edgar Wright, and then I think, the X-Men movies, they had Matthew Vaughn leave at one point and then came back. But, will we see another time of a Sam Raimi or a Nolan coming in and just running the show on these kind of movies?
Not to that extent, especially someone like Nolan, who obviously is sort of all about complete creative control. I mean, that's the double-sided, sort of getting into the sort of shared universe thing, right? It's like there's too much at risk, and every piece is part of a larger thing, and so you can't. That was the whole thing. There was a lot of talk about with Edgar Wright and Ant-Man, who I would have loved to have seen that movie, but was it just not meshing well with what Marvel was doing at that point? And we love these shared universes, and we love the idea that they all connect, but at the end of the day, that means that they are different kinds of films than just a one-off movie being made by an auteur. It can't be that,
It's closer to television,
It's
really.
much closer to TV, although, I mean, you still see, there are people who are fitting in, and James Gunn, who's a very sort of distinct vision. And Whedon's interesting because it's obvious that he burnt out on Age of Ultron, and it felt like that movie, he was being pulled in more directions, but it worked with Avengers. So you're having some people who are able to sort of work it out and sort of be like, I'm still getting in my vibe while also making the studio happy, but some people can't compromise like that, and that's not to say that they're bad people. It's just I don't see Chris Nolan saying, yeah, sure, I can make this fit with your 20 movies slate. It's just not going to work like that.
I mean, it is kind of then. I mean, I guess the question is, are we going to have sort of stylistically just flatter, for lack of a better word, samer movies? Like that's one of the I know that's not a real word, but one of the criticisms of the MCU movies is that they all look and feel and basically sound alike. With the exception, I think Winter Soldier was a little different, but
I mean, I think that criticism is both overstated yet not coming from nowhere, right? It's that weird thing of, can people sort of compromise? And sometimes, because it's hard to find that someone who has their own vision and is willing to work within a very sort of strict guideline. Sometimes they will hire people who probably are less, no pun intended, flashy, who are more maybe down the line just a good filmmaker, but not someone who has like a big,
or just a journeyman filmmaker.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But I mean, here's part of the issue though is, ultimately, if you're building this connected, shared universe and they're connected films, you need an artist's vision.
Right.
You can't just have a studio exec. There are several, good studio execs who do, they're smart people and they have taste. Not all of them do. Not every filmmaker is great. But it does seem to me you need somebody beyond just an executive worrying about a release date and a budget to oversee a shared universe, and that's where having artists and directors come in. But if you're Warner Brothers had been known as the filmmaker-friendly studio.
Right. They touted themselves as that.
They brought out all their directors at Comic-Con just a few months ago, including Rick Famuyiwa, and they brought out David Ayer, they brought out Ben Affleck, Zack Snyder, James Wan. I wonder and Patty Jenkins.
Yeah.
And I wonder if going forward, that's simply not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, we've talked before, obviously, about how Marvel. The great thing that Marvel's had is Kevin Feige from the beginning. A guiding force. If you consider the Marvel movies a TV show, he's your showrunner, and he's someone who seems to be very dedicated, knowledgeable. Have a great vision. And even if that's not to say those movies are don't have things to critique about them, but at the same time, it seems like someone knows what they're doing behind the scenes, and that's what DC's lack. Now, of course, now they've brought in Jeff Johns, and we're hoping that going forward things will be much more cohesive, but they are still in a major sort of trying to right the ship mode after these two movies back to back. I mean, especially Batman versus Superman and how that went over.
Yeah.
I think behind the scenes there's got to just be still a lot of micromanaging. This is all my speculation, but you just guessed that there's so much we have to fix this. Too much is at stake. And so it's probably a very tricky time.
But it's also, I mean, to be fair to DC, again, the Fox Marvel stuff is running into this too.
Yeah.
Look,
X-Men
Deadpool, that's Ryan Reynolds' baby.
Yep.
And not every filmmaker is going to be able to just take marching orders from their star. And then, of course, in the X-Men, with Gambit, that's two directors in a row. And we did just interview Doug Liman last week, and he refused to answer any questions about Gambit.
Oh, wow.
So what does that tell you? So, interesting times for comic book movies. Yeah. Will we ever see the likes of a Nolan or a Raimi, auteurs, if you will, coming in and calling the shots on comic book movies? We'll see. I guess maybe business is just too big. But let us know your thoughts, and for all things comic book movies, Marvel, DC, X-Men, all that jazz, keep it here on IGN.